Jesus said, "For it is as if a man going on a journey summoned his slaves and entrusted his property to them. To one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, to another 1, each according to his ability. Then he went away. The one who had received the 5 talents went off at once and traded with them and made 5 more talents. In the same way, the one who had the 2 talents made 2 more talents. But the one who had received the 1 talent went off and dug a hole in the ground and hid his master's money. After a long time, the master of those slaves came and settled accounts with them. Then the one who had received the 5 talents came forward, bringing 5 more talents, saying, 'Master, you handed over to me 5 talents. See, I have made 5 more talents.' His master said to him, 'Well done, good and trustworthy slave. You have been trustworthy in a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Enter into the joy of your master.' And the one with the 2 talents also came forward, saying, 'Master, you handed over to me 2 talents. See, I have made 2 more talents.' His master said to him, 'Well done, good and trustworthy slave. You have been trustworthy in a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Enter into the joy of your master.' Then the one who had received the 1 talent also came forward, saying, 'Master, I knew that you were a harsh man, reaping where you did not sow and gathering where you did not scatter seed, so I was afraid. And I went and hid your talent in the ground. Here, you have what is yours.' But his master replied, 'You wicked and lazy slave, you knew, did you, that I reap where I do not sow and gather where I did not scatter? Then you ought to have invested my money with the bankers, and on my return I would have received what was my own with interest. So take the talent from him and give it to the one with 10 talents. For to all those who have, more will be given, and they will have an abundance. But from those who have nothing, even what they have will be taken away. As for this worthless slave, throw him into the outer darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth." The Gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, O Christ. Please be seated. Friends, grace and peace to you from God the Creator and the Lord Jesus Christ. Amen. Gospel, the good news of Christ. Christ, the embodiment of God in this world. The embodiment of good news, redemption, salvation, freedom. Not just for us, for the world. It's in there somewhere. We have to find it. Our sermon title today is Fear Itself. Fear Itself. March 4th, 1933. The domestic economy is reeling. Banks are failing. Supply chain issues and workforce uncertainty leaves our country feeling little hope. Authoritarian leaders are conniving and seizing power, and the world is war-weary. Sound familiar? Mm-hmm. To help inspire action, FDR delivered an iconic line just moments into his inaugural address. "Let me assert my firm belief that the only thing we have to fear is fear itself." Nameless, unreasoning, unjustified terror which paralyzes needed efforts to convert retreat into advance. Retreat into advance. And through a really difficult time, he helped to lead our nation and the world to greater courage and hope. Through a lot of violence, but it was a turning of a tide. Fear is central in our gospel lesson today, which makes sense because the gospel always intersects with our lives as we actually lead them, and fear is a central part of being alive. We talked a little bit this morning in our confirmation class about how it feels an awful lot right now like Jesus may be coming back soon, because how could it really get any worse? But then we had to confess that our parents thought that, and their parents thought that, and their parents, and their parents. We're stuck in cycles of humanity, just the things we seem to do generation after generation. But fear is a central part of being alive. So let's think about fear for a moment. Fear. The number one definition of fear in the dictionary is this: a distressing emotion aroused by impending danger, evil, pain, etc., whether the threat is real or imagined, the feeling or condition of being afraid. But these days, fear is so mainstream. Fear, in its first definition, is an instantaneous reaction to a threat. So much so, and it's so powerful, that all reason and rationale and what you know to be true just gets thrown right out the window. It is this fear that grips us. Yeah, we kind of play around with it a bit at Halloween, but we have to admit that it really is a part of daily life. It triggers some more than others, but it is built into all of us. It has power within us. It has power that even spills out from within us into our relationships, in families, in systems, and even in cultures. This kind of fear, this definition of fear, has power and intrigue. So, of course, that's what sells. More horror movies are made by far than every other genre every year. I was not aware of that. There's lots of really bad ones. There's a few kind of good ones. But why is it? Why do we promise to consume so much horror and fear? Even more consequential is that this kind of fear is sold to us by our news sources, who get more viewers the more they can convince us that there is an impending disaster. It is sold to us by our political system, one side promising that if the other side wins in any way, we're all doomed. Is that any way for a political system to run? No. This is why God is in 3 parts, not 2. Last, but certainly not least, our social media algorithms are built to promote it. What emotion gets the quickest, most volatile reactions? What kind of content is most likely to draw attention? What is most likely to be reacted to, cause debate and argument, and draw out curse words? It's all this kind of fear. And so it spreads, whether it's true or not, whether it's real or not. Remember the definition said real or imagined? Most of the stuff online is imagined. Yes, fear is a natural part of our evolution. It's an important one. It's kept us alive. But to be surrounded and filled with it all the time is not healthy, and it's not God's plan for our lives. It sure does sell. It's all around us. It is sold to us, and we are sold using it. That's what social media is, by the way. If a service comes to you free of charge, you are the product. Ugh. We are sold using this kind of fear. And in our gospel lesson for today, it's this kind of fear that drives the actions of this poor slave. I don't know about you, but every time I read through this parable, I just feel so bad for this slave. Let's be honest, though. First of all, this parable is messy. It doesn't sound at all like, for example, 20 chapters earlier in Matthew, when Jesus gives the Sermon on the Mount, chapters 5 and 6, with the Beatitudes, the blessed are you, you are the salt and the light of the earth, judge not unless you would be judged. What happened to all that? But actually, this is part of a sermon on a mount. Did you know that there are 2 sermons on the mount in the Gospel of Matthew? The first one we know well, with all those things I just mentioned. But this is part of the second Sermon on the Mount. Jesus is standing now on the Temple Mount, speaking to his disciples just hours now from his arrest and brutal death. It's really no wonder that this Sermon on the Mount sounds more desperate, more anxious, more agitated. And today we hear a section about a landowner, the master, and his slaves. That right there is enough to cause most of us to go, ugh. A master and his slaves. But there it is. He gives talents to 3 slaves. Talents is an old Latin term that really just means an obscene amount of money. The guesstimates range, but most say it's about 20 years' pay for the average laborer. Yeah, it's like millions of dollars. And the first 2 slaves make their master proud. See, that just feels yucky. It tastes yucky in my mouth to say it, but there it is. The first two slaves make their master proud, but this poor third slave is afraid. He feels fear because of his master. We feel empathy for him because, he's in an abusive system with, it turns out, what may be an abusive master. Of course he's afraid. I don't know if what he says here about the master is true or not. Remember, this is not a historical story, it's a parable. But we're usually looking for, okay, who's the God character? Who are you called to be? But this doesn't feel an awful lot like God. You can hear the desperation in the words and stories of Jesus this close to the end. He will not be with them for the long haul, so he feels like he really just will say whatever he needs to keep the undivided attention of all who would listen. So what is the point that he's trying to drive home? Where did this poor slave go wrong? It feels like the turning point in the parable is the introduction of fear. He let fear drive his actions, and not the right kind of fear. He had been entrusted with a precious gift, probably more than he ever expected. A life-saving gift for some. It could be a transformational gift for someone like him, and he buried it in the ground because of his fear. Perhaps the main point of Jesus to anyone who would listen, including us, is that we too have been entrusted with a precious gift. Jesus knows that the road, especially for these disciples, the early church, but on through the generations, that it wouldn't be easy. The early church will see oppression and violence, anger, hatred, and suspicion. The state will try to conquer it, and when it can't conquer it, it will try to buy it, and when it can't buy it, it makes it the state religion in order to co-opt it, so much so that most of what Jesus has said no longer makes sense. Sad but true. The faith of the church will run into the strong preying upon the weak, the rich exploiting the poor, those who already have enough, aching and fighting for more, and those who have nothing, even what they have is taken away. Sound familiar? Generation after generation. Yes, it sounds familiar. And so what will the response of the faithful be with this precious gift that we have been given? We have been entrusted with a precious gift, not just our time, energy, and treasure. That stuff is very important. But through the gospel of Jesus Christ, all who listen and all who follow him are entrusted with the most precious gift of all, hope. That's what you can forget when you're scrolling through social media or when you binge watch the news or murder mysteries or whatever your thing is. So, will we let the world overwhelm us? Will we continue to participate in systems of greed and exploitation? Will we just kind of keep the whole thing rolling so that most of the things that Jesus said still don't make sense to us in our generations? Or will we share of the gift that's been given, proclaim that it is for all people, the hope that a better world is possible? Will we work for it? Will we be invested in it, or will we let that kind of fear make us bury it in the ground? You know, there are 12 definitions for the word fear in the dictionary. Just down from the one that we've been exploring so far today is another. Fear, reverential awe, especially toward God. Reverential awe. Now there's another $8 church phrase for you, but it does describe the kind of fear that is most often spoken about in the Bible, at least when it comes to relationship with God. Reverential awe means devotion to something higher and bigger than yourself, an admiration for something, especially God. What if we work from this kind of fear instead? The very wonder in our spirits at how amazing and transformational and life-giving the work of God is. How amazing it is that God is always working not just for our redemption, but for the redemption of the world. If we can commit ourselves to this, dear friends, then I truly believe that we can drive out fear. We can and will, with the help of God, drive out fear with fear itself. Thanks be to God.